They say blood is thicker than water. But I learned the hard way that sometimes the people who share your DNA can be the very ones who try to drown you. I never expected my life to change forever in a sterile law office in downtown Manhattan. But that's exactly what happened on a gray Tuesday morning in October. I sat across from Arthur Finch, my late Aunt Eleanor's longtime attorney, wearing the only black dress I owned. The grief was still fresh, weighing heavy on my chest. Aunt Eleanor had been more than family to me. She had been my salvation when my biological parents had thrown me away like yesterday's newspaper. Arthur cleared his throat and opened the thick manila folder. Beverly, your aunt was very specific about her wishes, he began. To my beloved niece, Beverly Redding, who has shown me what true family means, I leave my entire estate. This includes the Hamptons beachfront property. All shares in Vance Enterprises, totaling 65% ownership. And my personal assets valued at approximately $50 million. I felt the blood drain from my face. $50 million. I was still processing this when the office door burst open without warning. My biological parents, Richard and Linda Evans, stormed into the room like a hurricane of desperation and greed. Richard looked disheveled, his eyes bloodshot from another drinking binge. Linda was trying to maintain dignity in a knockoff designer dress. Beverly. Sweetheart, Linda shrieked, rushing toward me. We've been looking everywhere for you. I flinched away from her touch, my body recoiling from the woman who had walked out of my life 16 years ago. What are you doing here? Richard stepped forward, pointing at Arthur. Hold on. We're her legal parents. She can't just walk away with millions without our involvement. Arthur stood slowly. Mr. Evans. Beverly is 28 years old. Furthermore, you relinquished all parental rights 16 years ago. That was a mistake, Richard's voice cracked. We were young. Pressured. We're here now to make things right. The irony hit me like a physical blow. Where had this concern been when I was 12? Calling their empty apartment. Begging them to come home? Where had it been when I spent 3 days alone? Eating stale crackers because they had disappeared on another bender? The memories flooded back. The cold apartment with peeling wallpaper. The nights I stayed awake, watching the door. The relief when Aunt Eleanor's warm hand took mine and told me I would never be alone again. Before I could respond, Richard's demeanor shifted to threatening. One way or another, we're going to get what we deserve. Beverly can share what she inherited. Or we can make things very difficult. After they left, I drove to the Hamptons estate. The Victorian house sat on a bluff overlooking the Atlantic, its weathered shingles speaking of old money and traditions. I was barely through the door when Ben Carter, head of security, appeared. Miss Redding, you have visitors at the gate. The same couple from today. Through the monitor, I saw Richard climbing the fence while Linda pressed the intercom repeatedly. We're not leaving. This is our family's house now. Call the police, I told Ben. And thank you. The police arrived within 20 minutes. Richard was charged with trespassing. As I watched them being driven away, I felt relief mixed with profound sadness for the little girl who had hoped they would come home and be real parents. The next morning brought a nightmare. The New York Post headline read, "Heartless heiress abandons struggling parents after inheriting millions." The article painted me as calculating, having manipulated a lonely elderly woman, then discarded my own parents. Linda's quotes were vicious. Beverly was always cold. We tried to love her, but she pushed us away. We never imagined she would turn Eleanor against us. The story exploded across social media. Strangers called me heartless, suggesting I owed my biological parents a fortune for giving me life. Then Arthur called with worse news. Someone was investigating Eleanor's mental state during her final months. Former employees had been contacted by a lawyer representing concerned family members. "This has Marcus Thorne written all over it," Arthur said grimly. Marcus had been Eleanor's business partner until she discovered his embezzlement. When confronted, he had threatened to destroy her reputation. Now he was back, using Richard and Linda's desperation as his weapon. The harassment escalated. Someone threw a brick through my apartment window with a threatening note. My car tires were slashed. Strange calls came at all hours. The stress affected everything. I couldn't sleep, eat, or concentrate. Vance Enterprises stock dropped 15% as rumors spread about legal challenges. I found myself questioning everything. Maybe Richard and Linda were right. Maybe I didn't deserve this inheritance. During one dark moment, Arthur suggested checking Eleanor's private safe. She mentioned contingency plans. The safe was behind a painting, Eleanor said, reminded her of endless possibilities. Inside was a locked wooden box with my name engraved on brass. The first section contained legal documents that made my heart race. Eleanor had legally adopted me 15 years ago. Richard and Linda had no more claim to me than random strangers. The second section was more shocking. A digital recorder contained dozens of voicemails from Richard demanding money, threatening Eleanor, promising to make her life hell. There were also security videos of Linda pretending illnesses and begging for money, then laughing about the old bird falling for it again. The third section revealed Marcus's crimes. Eleanor had hired a detective who documented years of fraud, embezzlement of over $2 million, and evidence that Marcus had been coaching Richard and Linda. But the letter at the bottom brought tears to my eyes. "My dearest Beverly, if you're reading this, the vultures have come circling. You are not the frightened little girl I found 16 years ago. You are strong, intelligent, and kind. The people trying to hurt you abandoned you when you needed them most. Don't let their greed make you question your worth. Fight back. Beverly. You are my daughter in every way that matters, and I raised you to be a warrior, not a victim." Reading those words felt like Eleanor was there, reminding me who I really was. The guilt disappeared, replaced by cold, determined anger. I spent 2 days planning my counterattack. On Friday afternoon, I called Marcus and invited him to meet at Vance Enterprises headquarters with Richard and Linda. I told him I was ready to discuss settlement. They arrived looking victorious. Marcus wore an expensive suit and his signature smirk. Richard looked sober for once. Linda was dressed in rental jewelry. "Beverly," Marcus said, settling into his chair. "I'm glad you've come to your senses." "You're right," I replied, placing a folder on the table. This could have been avoided 16 years ago when my biological parents signed papers giving up all rights to me. I slid the adoption papers across the table. These show Eleanor adopted me 15 years ago. Richard and Linda have no legal relationship to me. Richard went pale, but Linda leaned forward aggressively. Those could be fake, which is why I had them authenticated by 3 legal SARS experts. Arthur placed notarized verification letters beside the papers. Marcus tried maintaining composure. "That doesn't change that Eleanor wasn't of sound mind when your clients are about to have bigger problems," I interrupted, reaching for the digital recorder. Richard's drunken voice filled the room, slurring threats and demands. The recordings went on for 10 minutes, each more damaging than the last. "Those are illegal recordings," Linda shrieked. "In New York, only one party needs to consent," Arthur explained calmly. I connected my laptop to the large screen. showing security footage of Linda's visits. The video showed her fake limping, pretending to faint, switching which leg was injured. The final video was most damaging, after getting a check for fake brain surgery. Linda could be heard saying, "God, she's so gullible. I'm going to Vegas." "Baby." Linda was sobbing real tears now, not the crocodile tears from interviews. "And Marcus," I said, opening the investigator's file. Embezzlement of $2.1 million. Selling proprietary information. Taking kickbacks. Coaching my biological parents on media manipulation. Marcus stood abruptly. "You can't prove this in court." "Actually, I can." Bank records. Emails. Recorded calls. Witness statements. The FBI loves financial fraud cases. For the first time, Marcus looked genuinely afraid. "What do you want?" "I want all three of you to disappear from my life permanently. Richard and Linda will sign documents agreeing never to contact me again. Never speak to media about me. Never make financial claims. In exchange, I won't press charges for extortion and fraud." I turned to Marcus. "You have 24 hours to turn yourself in and confess. If you do, I might not pursue additional conspiracy charges. And if I don't, then I hand everything to the FBI and district attorney. That will add years to your sentence." The room fell silent, except for Linda's sobbing. "You have 1 hour to decide," I said, gathering papers. "Arthur has settlement documents ready." As I walked toward the door, Richard made one last attempt. "Beverly, please. We're your parents." "Doesn't that mean anything?" I stopped and faced him. "You were never my parents. Parents don't abandon children when things get difficult. Parents don't show up 16 years later only when there's money involved. Eleanor was my mother in every way that mattered. She chose to love me when you chose to leave me. She built me up when you tried to tear me down. You made your choice 16 years ago when you decided I wasn't worth the effort. I'm making my choice now. Goodbye." The legal proceedings were swift. Richard and Linda signed settlement agreements that afternoon. Marcus turned himself in the next morning, eventually pleading guilty to multiple felonies. He was sentenced to 8 years in federal prison. Media attention shifted dramatically once truth emerged. The same reporters now wrote exposés about the elaborate con game the trio had attempted. 3 months later, I held a press conference announcing the Eleanor Vance Foundation for Abandoned Children. Standing in the same conference room where I had confronted my tormentors, I explained how the foundation would provide legal advocacy, counseling, and financial support for abandoned children. My Aunt Eleanor taught me that family isn't about genetics, I told assembled reporters. It's about choice. It's about showing up. It's about love without conditions. This foundation will help children learn their worth isn't determined by people who failed to appreciate them. 6 months later, I stood on the Hamptons house deck, watching sunset paint the Atlantic in brilliant orange and pink. Ben was beside me. No longer just security chief, but my business partner and closest confidant. We had grown closer during the crisis, bonding over shared values that had deepened into something meaningful. Vance Enterprises was thriving under my leadership. We had recovered from stock drops and increased valuation by 30%. The Eleanor Vance Foundation had already helped over 200 children. "Any regrets?" Ben asked, watching a sailboat drift across the horizon. I thought about his question. Did I regret discovering how truly selfish Richard and Linda were? Did I regret the stress of those dark weeks? Did I regret becoming harder than I'd wanted to be? No. I said finally. I regret that it took so long to understand what Eleanor was teaching me. She used to say some people will try to make you feel guilty for having boundaries, but that guilt is proof your boundaries are working. Ben smiled and took my hand. She sounds wise. She also said the best revenge against people who try to diminish you is to live a life so full and successful that you forget they ever existed. My phone buzzed with a text from Arthur. The adoption of 3 siblings through the foundation had been finalized. 3 children who had bounced between foster homes now had a permanent family who chose them deliberately. I showed Ben the message. Feeling that familiar warmth, knowing Eleanor's legacy continued changing lives. Somewhere, 3 kids were learning what I learned 16 years ago. Family is about choice, not chance. Come on, I said, squeezing Ben's hand. Let's go inside. We have a foundation board meeting tomorrow. As we walked back, I caught my reflection in the glass doors and smiled. The frightened, guilty young woman from Arthur's office 6 months ago was gone, replaced by someone I was proud to be. Someone Eleanor would have been proud of too. I had learned the most important lesson: you can't choose the family you're born into, but you can choose the family you build. And sometimes, the family you build turns out to be exactly what you needed all along.